Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our London Java Community event with Andrea. Let me introduce myself first of all. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Abby. I work with Barry Cranford, who's the founder of the LJC. That is just one of approximately 15 different communities that is run by RecWorks. RecWorks are a tech recruitment company with a massive difference. We believe that recruitment really can be a force for good in the industry beyond just placing people in jobs. We have a particular focus on learning, mentoring, and personal development. If people want to learn and others want to teach or share their knowledge, we are happy to connect you through our communities and events like this one today. We see this as giving back to those we've worked with in the past, but also paying it forward to those we hope to work with in the future. To date, we have run over 700 events for engineers, developers, students, graduates, CTOs. We have run conferences, lightning talks, hackathons, all sorts. Earlier this year, we made our 4,000th introduction through our Meet a Mentor program, which is one of our communities. We are really looking forward to making our 5,000th that's a mouthful, isn't it? Introduction through that community as well. All of our communities are completely free as well. So if you want to know more about any of them, please do get in touch with myself, Barry, or Helen Lewis if you know her, and we can take it from there. We love to give opportunities for people to connect, and this event is part of that. The recording of today's session will be available on YouTube. I will put the link in the chat later for you so that you've got that ready for when it's available. Obviously, it'll be on our YouTube channel and you can go and check it out, rewatch. But with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Andrea for her talk today. If you have any questions, please make a note of them or put them in the chat as we go along, and we'll come to them at the end. That would be great. Over to you, Andrea.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Abby, and welcome to everyone. I hope I'm a good entertainment for while you have your nice lunch or whatever it is that you're doing. And yes, so what are you going to learn today? Because you might be wondering, why did I turn up? Should I even be here? Whatever. So what you're going to learn today is 5 tools of collaboration. And the collaboration here is about trying to understand your systems, your software better. And I decided to do this talk because as I went through my pretty long career, I realized that I knew about some tools, I heard about some tools, and I didn't know, I didn't find a menu. When should I use each of these tools? So I did put this here, which I tend to kind of skip when I go through in a talk, because 20 years is a long time. And I've been to teams that succeeded, and some of them that didn't succeed so much, and some of them that completely failed. And the thing that I notice about the pattern of things getting more and more difficult is when people in the teams don't have a coherent view of the system. Or they are pulling in different directions and they don't even realize. Obviously, that's not a recipe for success. And so, on this metaphor of the talk, which is, this is a board game called Pandemic, probably on the topical side of things. If you haven't played this game, this is a game that is a collaborative game where you play together to beat the game. And it's funny because that would be quite similar to what you're trying to do in your systems, right? You are playing as the player of one of many people, kind of like a team. And you need to understand what you're doing and understand the moves you need to do as a player or a participant in a team. And also you want to understand what your team members are doing. And also you want to understand the whole board. So we're going to go through some tools that allow you to do those 3 things. You need to understand the landscape, etc., etc. So the thing about these tools, and I'm going to call them tools, even though some people might be like, oh, what is this tool? Is this a hammer or something? These are just have some meetings that will result on some diagrams, right? That's all I mean. That's not demystifying the thing. So these tools sometimes make people feel, ooh, maybe I need some special permission for using these tools. Guess what? We're all wearing all different hats, like these very cool cats here. Yeah. When you're trying to use any of these tools, you can just try them with your team. Some of these allow for you to try them yourself, and you don't need any permission. The worst thing that can happen if you use these tools is that you get a better insight of your systems. So it's also bear in mind, I guess, it's worth thinking about the fact that when you're a member of a team, and I'm going to assume everyone here works in software and that is part of a team, or that it works very closely with other teams. Everyone in a team generally doesn't, you have a title, but you generally have multiple roles. And that means that you could be doing something that actually kind of puts you in the, you will need to do some product decisions, even if you're a software developer, just because you're doing some very small decision. Maybe the opposite happens too. And the hat of architecture is a strange one, because sometimes there is a role in the company that represents it, but sometimes there isn't. And that doesn't mean that you can't wear that hat. So feel free to try the architect hat. And what I mean by architect and what I mean by architecture is that it's about decisions that are expensive to revert, just to keep it very simple. So do you do anytime ever a decision that is difficult to revert? Would you benefit from doing some modeling or planning? And the answer is yes, because you're in this talk and you want to learn about it. So I'm going to guess you are interested. So like planning, modeling is its own reward. That means that when you do any of this, when you use any of these tools, the result that you want is that that walk that you make with your team or with yourself in creating these diagrams, right? The result is kind of like a picture that you take while you're on holidays. The whole point of the picture is just to remember in more detail, like it's a recall exercise, right? What all the alternatives that you thought about while you were doing this exercise is really what you're looking for. So don't it's like the resulting diagrams aren't precious. They're important, they're a good record, but the important thing is exercising this. So this is kind of like, now I introduce you to these tools. I'm going to take a little sip of water. So as I'm showing you these 5 tools, I'm going to talk to you about what value they bring and maybe how they look. It's just a kind of really light overview. All I want to do is show them to you. If you want to learn them, there is some resources at the end of the talk. Probably each one of these will merit, if not its own talk, its own series of talks on how to use them. And they're generally quite deep tools. So this is just a sampling menu so that you understand what they are, when to use them, who should be there maybe. And so the first tool that I'm going to talk to you about is about understanding the high level kind of context. If we're using the board game analogy, I'm going to say that this is the the actual board, right? So this is a tool called Wardley Maps. So a Wardley map is a kind of diagram that you do together where you're trying to answer the question, how do needs get met? And how do I, and also it's about being able to visualize how things evolve, which is a very, very powerful combo. So they are generally used for making decisions, and that's generally because it allows you to see this kind of transition, these evolutions of certain tools. So this is the canonical example of a Wardley map. It has a couple of anchors, the business and the public. This is a sample diagram or whatever for a tea shop, right? So this is a tea shop. They sell tea. People buy the tea. quite simple. So the way you read this diagram is every line is a need. So the business needs cups of teas. Public definitely need cups of tea. Tea is the best, except for when you want coffee, and then coffee is the best. So these cups of teas, what do you need to make a cup of tea? You definitely need a cup. You definitely need tea. You definitely need hot water. And to make hot water, you need water, and probably you need some way to make water hot. And to make water hot, generally you will use a kettle and you need power. So that's how you read this thing. Another thing to notice about this Wardley diagram, is that there is 2 axes. The position of these things is relevant and important. So if you go from bottom to top, things become less visible to the top as you go to the bottom. So probably the kettle is not quite visible to the public. Same thing on the x-axis. So things that are kind of leftmost are things that are less developed. You know, in here you could think of prototypes or very rough things, and then custom built, and then product, and things that are commodities. So a commodity, think of something that whether you buy them from or get them from different places, they are quite similar. Think power, water, etc. I mean, without thinking too much about current state of power. But anyway, so here you see this little thing, right? You see the kettle. And there is this red stuff here. What's going on? Well, in here, we're saying that this particular tea shop had a custom-built kettle. Why? I don't know. But that's a good question that the diagram might force you to ask. And then you start thinking, all right, well, let's analyze this a little bit. If we wanted to kind of see what will happen if we actually go for a productionized kettle, what would be the change of that? How would our system change? And how would we think, what are the side effects of doing this innovation? Oh, actually, this a more kind of standard kettle won't need this kind of slightly custom power. And so I can commoditize power and maybe save a lot of time, effort, etc. to the business of the tea shop. This is the story that this map is kind of telling us. But it enables inquiry, right? Because Wardley Maps are all about kind of trying to really surface assumptions, the assumptions of the people that are doing this Wardley Map, without kind of breaking the story that the people had to create to make that Wardley Map happen. So this is like a tea shop. You might be like, okay, that's cool, Andrea, but how about some software? Well, this is an example of a Wardley map of a company that had you know, image printing and manipulations, etc. Right? This is actually an example from Simon Wardley, which is the creator of the Wardley maps, and actually how this whole thing started about more than 10 years ago. So you read the same. So this is slightly maybe something that is a bit more familiar to people in software, right? You have a customer and the customer needs online image manipulations for it to be a customer. They need printing, but start seeing and reading how all these thoughts are in slightly different places, right? I'm sure you're kind of probably following me going like, oh, customer needs online photo storage. And you can see this value chain. So this thing that this needs graph, that's what we call the value chain. We can see how it all starts linking together. And you might wonder, as you read this as I was talking, how can this evolve? Great news, I have this done for you. So maybe we can think, what if we can upgrade the platform, and this would can upgrade compute so it's not a product and we can commoditize it a bit. Maybe we can use cloud infrastructure and we wouldn't need a data center. Again, what are the impacts of that? I know that this is like very fast, but I hope that it can show you that Wardley Maps can kind of clarify all your thinking with regards about your systems and assumptions about what you actually need, because yes, you definitely need to run your website somewhere, but where? And this allows you to have the discussion at that strategic level, kind of removing a little bit of the implementation details that are necessary, but you need to kind of have a concrete situation to draft, right? So it helps you flesh out a little bit of misalignment or avoid quite embarrassing mistakes. Because it does this thing of needs, it tends to kill buzzwords. So these Wardley maps are all about how needs get met and how they can evolve. Isn't that cool? I think so. So next tool is about understanding, kind of zooming in, diving deeper into the problem. We saw this kind of context level tool. We're zooming in into something slightly more specific. So we're gonna, yes, this is an interesting thing. For any of these tools, generally there's other tools that are doing more or less the same. This is just the two tools I chose to show you. A lot of this can be used in conjunction. So, you know, get curious and investigate them if you like this stuff. So right now, for understanding the problem better, I'm going to show you domain storytelling. So domain storytelling, it's, well, the name kind of tells, it kind of hints about stories, right? So this is kind of, it's a pictographic story. This is why there's little numbers there. I don't know if you can see them. See, it's telling an actor, something happens, number 2, etc. So it's kind of a workshop format that helps people have conversations about the domain. And this icons, this iconography is a restricted language, right? So, and there's some rules. For example, people can only be there once, as in the customer can't be there and then be here as well, like in 40 places. Another interesting thing about domain storytelling is that you focus on one single kind of pathway, right? This example is about booking tickets for the cinema, right? But it's not doing conditionals. It's not like, what if X? Then if you have what if, you create a separate diagram, right? So domain storytelling helps you align participants and stakeholders because you have to create something like this. Now, imagine you and your team are trying to create this. You probably, if your team doesn't have a domain expert generally embedded, you want that person to be there. And you want to be very curious and listen very actively to the story of how this happens. And you can ask, oh, well, what if X, what if Y? And then tell the story. By the end of this workshop, you should be able to read the story and say something like, the customer asked for a reservation to the cashier, who then the cashier finds available seats in the screen path with the ticketing system and so forth. It should make sense, and everyone should kind of be like, oh yes, that's exactly what we just discussed. And you know, that seems like a really useful thing. So the people that created this workshop format, they also wrote, well, there's a couple of books actually. So there's a book by the people that kind of created it, but also there's some other book that describes this. There's also, in one of those books, I can't remember which one, there is kind of some examples on how to turn this into domain, like actual domain boundaries and such. So it's a very useful heuristic for it. Very, very helpful. So domain storytelling, this is very nice diagrams. What are they for? Nice diagrams with a restricted pictographic language that tells you a story that encourages you to actively listen to understand the problem better, right? So that seems like a win, and like zooming into the problem. Right, next thing. Now we kind of understand the high level context, we understand the problem, how things should flow. Now we kind of dig a little bit deeper. What is currently there? What are your current systems? Maybe how they can evolve. So you're going even more into detail and implementation. Now, for that, I'm a big fan of C4. Generally, I can use this with sequence diagrams. Some people like this combination or some other combinations. Some other people use UML or CRC. Again, options for everyone. But you might be wondering, what is C4? Oh, this is what happens when you don't do C4, right? I don't know if this happens to you, but when you start in a company, Sometimes you get lucky and someone says, let me draw this thing for you. Maybe you can kind of follow the first couple of minutes, but after that, this is kind of how you see the person drawing. They're like, yes, believe me, you know, it's fine. And it's complicated because in reality, they're trying to do two things. They're trying to show what's happening from a systems point of view, generally mixing several abstraction layers in one diagram. That's quite common. But also they're trying to talk to you about their language, as in the language of the systems that they are working with. As a new person, either new to the company or new to the team, suddenly you're kind of overloaded with this domain knowledge. So this is why it's so complicated and why it's so hard to follow, and why people kind of like, what if I record it? Let's record this conversation, and then I'll watch it again in a couple of months where I'll know at least half of these words, or what do they actually mean, you know, as fun as, you know, horse pockets as a service name is. So C4 diagrams, how can they help on this problem? Well, C4 diagrams kind of they look kind of like this would be the different diagrams. So it's C4 because it's like 4 C's, and those are the C's involved. And the idea here is that at a highest level, you just kind of have the very interactions, and you don't care too much about details. But you zoom in, and maybe you see slightly more details. Maybe you see some technical things. And you keep zooming in there. Now, I used to think that I used to not understand why we cared about code here. But recently I learned that this fourth level, the code level, is not about being precise and, you know, or it's not about just doing it for the sake of it or whatever, but it is about anchoring this thing. So when you have this whole thing like drawn, you can kind of go back, like probably when you're drawing it, you initially do the level 1, 2, 3, and 4, but then you're able, and 4 you can probably generate, but then you're able to, with that, go back and see if these diagrams are an illusion or not, which is a very handy thing. So what does a context diagram look like? It should be really simple. Imagine you start in a company, and instead of the crazy diagram with all the arrows in 53 boxes, you see this. It's like, okay, there's some person. Okay, I understand people are good. And this is our system. And this is some external system. Okay, what do they do? Oh, one is some sort of alerting system that, you know, it's used to send some SMS. Cool, that's good. And this other thing is about collecting the data. And then this is our thing. Okay, that's instantly slightly more approachable, right? You're like, okay, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Let's go to the next thing. Oh, okay, we're zooming into our system, and we have, oh, this is a container, very good, and it's called status dashboard. Oh, okay, now there's a lot more details here, right? We can see that this is sent by SMS. We can see that this is a REST API. We see that there's some JSON there, and then we can see, oh, this is a web app, and it has JavaScript and HTML5, very good. Okay, we have more levels of detail. Okay, still lemon squeezy. Let's see if we can zoom into something else. What do we actually work on, person that I'm talking to? Oh, we actually, every day we commit code to this web application. Oh, cool. And suddenly you can answer questions like, what is the database technology or storage technology we're using? And you can see how there's still some details about the edges. Still the legend of how to read this is consistent across the previous and the next one. So still a person, still external things, and such. And but you're still not overwhelmed with details that might be hard to grok. Also, this is separated here. So maybe if we had more than this system, maybe we have another diagram for visualization dashboard, or maybe not, because that belongs to someone else. But you can start deciding what's meaningful and important for you, and just try to show one thing at a time so that you can actually absorb it. Okay, so, and as I said, the class diagram, obviously this is different if you're doing functional programming. You might want to diagram this in a different way, but if we want to talk about that, we can talk about that. The thing that you do want to do is use this diagram if you've no system diagrams, or you keep writing them every time, or if you want to have diagrams that are approachable, I think that that's a good net result. I am slightly biased because I'm a big fan of this, but yeah, this is what C4 is. So we were starting at a very high level. We kind of dug into the problem to understand the domain a little bit better. Then we dug deep into what are our current systems and how they interact with each other. And now we come to recording expensive decisions. Now, I did mention earlier that I think it's a useful thing to think about. So useful way to think about architecture is to think about architecture as something that is expensive to change. And this is why you want to record those decisions. So one of the hardest things about ADRs is not actually to write ADRs, because it's just a template that you can store. So most people can store it with their code bases. And this started off when monoliths were quite popular. So it's a little bit more complicated when you have microservices that are distributed in multiple repositories, but still possible. And the idea is that you just write a document, Markdown. This is the format. And you say, what is the status? As in, oh, I want to propose this. Or no, we decided this is good. We say, what's the context? Why are we trying to change things? What did we decide? And the consequences. I like to add as well options considered, because I found that extremely useful. But you can just write. It's after all a piece of text. You probably thought I was going to say something else. But yes, one of the hardest things about this particular tool is to keep doing it. And for that, I recommend that someone owns it. As in, I think the team should own it, sorry, that the ownership should be collective, but someone is responsible for this actually happening. And if you're in a good collaborative team that likes to have a kind of pass the role of architecture or anything like this around, it is really useful to kind of have okay, this month this person is responsible for reminding us, have we done this? Are the things up to date? But your mileage might vary, or you can just do it yourself if you really believe in it. I think I think it's useful to see as an example. I don't know if you can read it, but what you can definitely see in this example is that this is really short, so it shouldn't take you a long time to write. So it's a very low barrier to start trying to do this. Okay. Yes. Sorry, I was just thinking, what is it that is good about this? Well, so I think the value here is quite obvious in that having a place to come back to search for why you change something is extremely valuable. So if you can do it, I believe in you, then that would be great. So finally, we come to how do you keep doing all of this? And I'm gonna kind of heads up, like I'm gonna kind of give you my disclaimer. I created this tool. It's called Bytesize Architecture Sessions. So obviously I think it's really good, and I've been doing this for quite a few years. But I'm sure there are some other similar tools actually, but I think this one is really good. Again, bias, because it tries to really address the silos of knowledge. So in most teams, there's at least one person that most people just ask that question to, right? And as we kind of described before, if you have a team of people, and especially the people that kind of wind up implementing stuff, whatever their idea of the system is, that's exactly what they will encode, right? So if their idea is incorrect or incomplete, that is what wind up codified, right? So it is absolutely a massive win if everyone in the team has a kind of cohesive picture of what the systems that they work in, what they are, right? So how do you do this? I also kind of thought that long meetings I mean, nobody pays attention for a very long time, right? I think 45 minutes to an hour is the top limit, especially remotely, for people actually being able to engage in any meeting. So what this format proposes is that we do something like this. Imagine we're in this beautiful team. So we have giraffe, pink squirrel, all these friends, right? So this is a couple of programmers, some designers, some product people, maybe a couple of testers, who knows? It's a team, right? The team needs to do some stuff. So in this meeting, so the bite-sized architecture session basically say, you meet once every maybe 2 weeks, some iteration, 2-3 weeks, you will meet, and at the start of the meeting, they spend up to 5 minutes, no more, deciding what are they gonna actually do. If this is the first time the team is doing this, they probably should do a C4 context diagram, right? They'll be like, right, we're gonna do a C4 of the things we actually work on, and after that, they'll put on a timer like this, boom, they'll put on a timer and they'll spend 5 minutes drawing that. So obviously, because these are different people and they'll have very different ideas about what what they do. Some of them maybe are new to the team, so they'll be like, what is going on? I have just a stick figure with one box. That's absolutely fine. The purpose of this time alone together is twofold. First is that you are in the meeting and you are kind of on your own, even though everyone is there. You have like 5 minutes to really think about what is it that you're doing. What is the thing that you know about this, whatever you decided to draw, like say a C4 context diagram? How does their interactions work? Oh, I don't remember. I think it was something like that. No problem. Put a box with a question mark if you don't remember the name. Whatever it is, just try to really get into it. This time also allows for some really good practice for junior members of the teams, right? Maybe they are not used to the practice of architecture. So this is a very safe environment for them to learn how to do diagrams, which is a hard skill. So after the 5 minutes, they will all come together. So if you're in person, you can do the thing where each one kind of does a show and tell, a little show and tell of what they drew, or maybe everyone just kind of pass it along or whatever. The idea is that you spend the rest of the time of the meeting, maybe up to 5 minutes before, kind of going like, okay, what we know when we drew together, we will create one diagram, the one diagram to rule them all, which someone will take away and kind of store somewhere. But so together you spend this time kind of discussing, because you spend 5 minutes before drawing this thing yourself, you probably have questions. You're like, wait a minute, are you sure that the thing A connects to the thing B? Or maybe shouldn't we do X? Now, all those questions are exactly how you learn, right? Because you start questioning the system, because these diagrams are sometimes abstractions that we have in our heads, not necessarily deployables, or maybe they are, and maybe they should be deployed together, or maybe they shouldn't. All of those questions are really useful. Now, an important thing after this consensus happened is that there's one person responsible for codifying whatever it is. Basically, if you were in person, you probably were drawing in a whiteboard. Someone take a picture and kind of turn it into something that you can come back with. Or if there's questions that you couldn't resolve in there, that person should go away and next meeting come back with the answers so that this can continue. I suggest that people rotate who this person is, again, for more learning, etc. Another important thing of this is that you iterate, because if you do this once, that's good. But if you do this after 2-3 weeks, it's a massive win. So bite-sized architecture sessions. So the way this works is a short meeting. You recur on it. You have this very rich and important time alone, but together. And then you reach consensus also together, right? So the resulting diagrams become also, interestingly, a familiar design tool. So the next time you need to do something, guess what? You have some nice diagrams. So people go like, what if we change this and that and the other? And because we all did them together, you're not like, what the hell was that? Because you were there making it. right? So the better, so because you have that, people start questioning current designs, and they start thinking about how we can improve them. The massive win on all of this is that the team has a similar picture of the architectures in their head, which will make them better people implementers, right? I mean, they also shared language, etc., etc. As I said, I made this, so you know, let me know. I'd love to hear if you do use this. How did it go? And also, you know, any feedback or whatever. So we looked at these 5 amazing tools, especially the last one's so good. Wow. And hopefully some of these tools will totally help you understand your systems better. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. And I wonder if you have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrea. That was amazing. Does anybody have any questions?
I see some hands.
Yeah, I do have questions. That was really good. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah.
Jenny, yes.
Yes, that was excellent. That was really good. And one of the things I've been looking at is driving innovation and creating high performance team, and we use Agile. And I was trying to see how in Agile we can bring this, and I quite like the concept of this Wardley
Maps.
Wardley Maps, which is really, really nice. And I can see you challenge assumptions, and I think challenging assumptions leads to innovation, you know, one way or the other. So I really like that, and I wanted to thank you for that. So I have 2 questions, which is, like I said, we're using Agile. And in Agile, it's about recursion, right? You do iteratively, you do a little bit, and then you deliver, and it's also like you vertical slice them end to end. So what we do with our architecture most of the times is actually take bits of parts of the architecture, because it's a huge architecture. You take bits and you iteratively add to the architecture as well. Now, I want to know your take on it, because for me, sometimes doing architecture in bits, right, not knowing how the other system works, you may change some bits of it. And because you've done architecture and implemented some bits of it, you know, it is a cost, is lost cost. So how would you suggest in Agile we architect these things? Do you recommend architecting in small, you know, iteratively, or you think no, architecture should be the basis of anything you do after? So architecture first, the whole hog is sitting there, and then you implement. And maybe as you're implementing, you'd realize the architecture needs to change. So what's your
okay, so I think the question is something like, should you do some planning or some modeling of some sort, let's call it, before you do something, or not? And when should you do one or the other? That's the question I understand you're asking.
Yeah, and should architecture be even split, like you implement iterative architecture?
I'm not sure I understand that part, but let's answer the first part. I think that for any implementation you're going to do, it depends, is the key answer there. So if you're going to do something really large, just going at it without thinking about it at all is a recipe for disaster, right? So I think you probably want to de-risk whatever is the riskiest aspect of your system, right? So are there any unknowns in there, at least from a technical point of view? And if there are, then you want to, you know, find out what is going on there, and take it from there, right? And then when you're implementing it, because you're doing Agile, you do, okay, we understand that these are the risks here. We understand these bits of technology, yes or no, and then you move a little bit, deliver something. Is it all right? Does it match the plan of what we're trying to do? And iterate. So that seems like an approach that works.
Okay, yeah. And my second question is, I love the ADR tools, and that you said about recording expensive decisions. I haven't even thought about it, right? We put it in GR tickets, like why we made these decisions, but I quite like the fact that there's something like recording these decisions we are making, because then we come back and say, oh, why did we make this decision? Then we have some information. However, Agile is about less documentation, but it's also flexible. And I can see a lot of the decisions on what should be recorded and what should not be recorded is also a quite challenging question, right? Because if you ended up recording everything, it is not sustainable. But at the same time, you need to understand what needs to be recorded. Do you have anything on that topic of what you think you should record?
Well, it is really a judgment call, really.
Yeah.
But you know, if something is going to take you more than 2 weeks to change, that's a candidate for recording. So what changed to your storage mechanisms, to how you do your front end, those are clear winners for and candidates for something you want to store. It depends on your system, or it could be changes in how you actually implement something. Just think about how long would it take you to make that change, and then that's the decision made.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's really useful. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, it's Graham here. I've got a quick question. Sorry, I'll put my camera on. I can say hi. I can see that this process would work for new systems. How would you suggest, if you come in and you're faced with multiple systems, microservice type systems that are all talking to each other, and you don't feel you have that complete picture, how would you, I'm sort of thinking, about how you could then sort of put some planks in place from this to support sort of current understanding and future directions forward. I mean, would you start from the sort of C4 level, or would you be sort of thinking more at the domain level, or is it another sort of it depends kind of thing?
Well, I think for anything that is too big to understand needs to be broken down. Well, I'm sorry for when I said it, it sounded like, well, obvious thing is obvious. So sorry, Graham. But I think you probably, I assume that if there is this very large system, that also means there is multiple teams dealing with it. And so that it would make sense to me to empower the teams to self-document. After all, these tools are useful inside every team. Based on that, you can use that information to kind of bring the knowledge up to however many levels you want to create a coherent picture. And then you probably need a few people that are kind of making sure there is coherence amongst nearby teams. Say, for example, you're creating food, you probably put, burger, bread, and ketchup nearby, and maybe the cake is somewhere further away. At some point, it all winds up on the table, but you can create a hierarchy that way.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for that.
But if you want, by the way, if any of you want to chat later, just I can stay back for a couple of minutes. I can sense longer questions. Anyone else? Ron?
Go for it.
Yeah, I was wondering if you tried using bite-size architecture as a forward-looking technique for systems that don't exist yet.
Ooh, nice question. So I haven't tested it recently, but I have tested it once because it was like, we need to do X now. And so, and we did the alone together breaking up. And it's funny because I thought the answer was super obvious. And that everyone will come up with either really similar things. And there was a few close people, but then there were some really good ideas that I think we might have not heard about. And I think it's because it really enables this, someone that gave me feedback on Alone Together time as a great tool to enable to kind of shut down the louder voices, but nicer. So it gives this kind of little bit of room to just think instead of just kind of saying the first thing that comes to mind. So I guess, yes, I would love to explore that more. So if you have tried that, I'd like to hear about it. Oh, Rebecca,
go for it.
Hi.
Hello.
That was a great talk, by the way. Thank you. So for the kind of the bite-sized sessions and being alone together, what kind of advice would you give for, say, junior developers or people who kind of lack in confidence because they think that they're not good enough to do this sort of thing? How would you advise kind of supporting them doing it for the first few times?
Well, I would personally, this is where, especially if you have more than one junior, you want to grab them before, like the host. If I was the host, I would grab them. You know who your team is because you're working with them. So you kind of grab them separately and just tell them that this is going to happen. Tell them, basically reassure them that this is a safe place. Basically, the worst thing that can happen is you do a drawing that just doesn't represent reality, but then you learn, right? So you kind of need to sell it to them a little bit. But I think a key aspect of really working in a team is psychological safety. So if you have that in your team, then this is easy. And if you don't have that, you kind of need to work hard, especially with engineering managers and whoever is kind of responsible for enabling having psychological safety, that team gets to have that, even in the context of, even if it's just for the context of the meeting, if possible. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Thank you.
Any other questions? I will take that as a no. So all that's left for me to say then is thank you so much, Andrea, for coming and sharing some of what you know. It's been absolutely fascinating and obviously really useful for people. You're getting lots of applause and thank yous in the chat as well. So that's always encouraging, isn't it? And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's been really great to see all of you, and I look forward to seeing you at our next event as well. And please do keep your eyes open on our LinkedIn and Twitter for upcoming events. They'll all be posted there, and you should all have the YouTube channel for being able to catch up on any of our previous talks as well. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.